Let's get ready for our very first talk of the day. And for this, I'd like to bring on Chris from Plume to tell you about what's happening with RWAs. Please give him a big round of applause.
All right. All right. Hey, everybody. Great to be out here in Denver today with everybody talking about, crypto and all kinds of things today. And so we're going to get a little bit into RWAs today. Right, and RWAs mostly are an acronym that nobody cares about or nobody really understands. So we'll talk a little bit about it. And the prompt really was, are RWAs a rug or this time actually different? And we'll get into all of that, right? So maybe really quickly, this is me, this morning, and I'm sure the same for a lot of you, right? Looking at the phone, right, and realizing that we're tanking here. Right, and BTC's kind of come down the wrong way, right? And so that's kind of the starting point of kind of where we are today, right? And so that just sets the tone and sort of a bit of a somber mood for all this. But the positive stuff is this, right? Like the sentiment stuff is actually still, it's a strange sort of discord between the sentiment and the price, right? This is the sentiment of crypto over time, and you can see right now we are at the same place as we were in August. Right? Except the difference is that August, we were at 50K for BTC, and right now, we're still at like 85-ish, right? So price is up, but sentiment could not be worse, right? Now, why is that, right? And I think everybody knows this already, but we can bring this up and talk about it. Number one, right, it's this, right? Trump sits here and right before the inauguration, rugs us, has his wife come in and do the exact same thing the day after, right? And then, of course, then we get the Argentinian president doing a different one as well, right? And so this has just led to a lot of, I think people are tired and people are not feeling great about where things are going. And this is not what we thought would happen when Trump came into office, right? We thought that it would be an opening factor for crypto, not a sort of free pass to do crime on chain, right? And this is kind of one tweet I think that summarizes the whole thing, right? People in Denver, right, have been talking about how we're tired of central. They're talking of tired of memes, tired of vapor, tired of nonsense. People want to go back to what we're supposed to be doing. It's real things, right? It's something that matters. It's real yield. It's all these things, right? Which is the rotation into RWAs, which is happening right now, right? Now, obviously, there's a joke, right? The actual rotation is this, right? So if you look at this is a sector performance over the last month, right? And so if you look at things like, AI, right, or infrastructure, you look at, DeFi, DeSci, whatever it might be, even BTC, everything is down, right? RWAs are up. Right? And why is that again, right? It's because people are rotating back into real things. It's because people are hopeful and want to do things that are real and come back to sort of the ideals of crypto, right? Wrong, right? The actual reason is because of this, right? Because people have seen this guy on screen. This guy is a guy named Larry Fink. He's a founder, he's the CEO of a company called BlackRock, right? It's a $12 trillion asset manager. He talks a lot about tokenization, right? And everyone is excited because he wants to bring things on chain. Right? And the reason is very simple. The RWA opportunity is massive, right? You look at things like derivatives, you look at things like real estate, right? Stocks, debt, alternative assets. Every one of these things is multiple hundreds of trillions of dollars, $1,000 trillion, right? It's big. And crypto is 2 to 3 trillion, still very small, right? So the idea is very, very simple. When people think about RWAs, what they're thinking is Larry is going to take that 12 trillion, dump it into crypto, and we're all going to get rich, right? And obviously, it's just not true, right? But doesn't mean that it isn't not. It doesn't mean that it is nonsense. There is something real happening here, right? And if you look at all the stuff happening here, you can get a feel. Here are all the headlines of late, right? Things like, BlackRock tokenizing stuff, State Street coming out with the credit cards. You can now use your crypto, right? You have things like Visa introducing a network, right? People are doing all kinds of stuff around tokenization, a bunch of big names and blah, 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 right? The only thing is if you pull back this one layer deeper, right? The thing that you'll find is that the headlines of today, right, read very much like the headlines of yesterday, right? So this is an article from just a couple months ago, right? It's about improving operational efficiency gains, right? It's about, doing real estate on chains. You can buy a fraction of a house or whatever, right? Or you can do things like buy fractions of a venture firm on chain, right? And if you look back 2-3 years ago, this is the exact same nonsense that we were talking about last time. Right, 2022, right? We're doing tokenized real estate. We could buy fractions of a house, right? Increasing liquidity and transparency, simplifying operations and management, the whole thing, right? And even then, we're talking about doing venture capital on chain, right? It's the same nonsense as last time, right? Except the difference is last time didn't work very well, Still, most things went to zero. These things are down 90%, right? No usage. Right, another one, Goldfinch, right? Again, both these are our partners and friends, right? And many of these folks are investors in Plume as well, so I'm not knocking them, but just to say, right, as a statement of reality, last cycle we tried this stuff and we're saying the exact same bullshit as last time and expecting things to be different this time, right? And it's not going to happen, right? Again, so what is this, right? Things are up right now. How can this materialize, and how does this actually come into what it needs to be, right? Now, again, if we go back to it, right, the reason why RWAs are popular right now is because they think, people on Twitter think that Wall Street is going to come in and buy our bags, right? Whereas the truth is, right, Wall Street is making us buy theirs, right? That's what's actually going on, right? If you look at, maybe another point on it, right, it's buy side and the sell side, right? If people who've been in finance, right, you kind of know what this is, but I'll just say it again. There are two sides of business. One is the buy, which means you come in and you're bringing assets to get people. Oh, sorry. What the buy side is, you're coming and bringing capital, right? It's us, right? When you buy tokens, you're the buy side, right? You're like, putting capital in. The sell side is the side that brings the assets in, right? They're bringing assets, they're looking for capital today, right? And people don't really understand the distinction. That's why on CT today, everyone thinks, oh, Trad's coming, this means tons of liquidity, right? Everything's going to be great and blah, blah, blah. What they don't realize is the buy side, it's only the sell side, right? And again, if you think about it again, this guy, right, is coming in to dump his shit onto us. There's no fucking way he's buying this nonsense, right? And so the idea that he's going to come in, right, and dump a bunch of cash into crypto and make us all rich is ridiculous, right? Now, if we go back to it, right, what are we actually doing here, right? Again, this is just more on like how this actually happens. Look at all these headlines, right? Chintai and R3, right, which is a grift from last cycle, right, is talking about dumping an $800 million fund on chain so you can buy some ESG nonsense, right? I can buy some tokenized Middle Eastern assets, right, or some real estate on chain there, or I can buy some. I can get scammed by Nigerians on chain too now, right? Like all this stuff is just like nonsense that is bringing stuff on chain to allow you to get rugged, right? That's all this shit is, right? Doesn't mean there's not value here, right? But just to be clear about what's actually happening and what isn't happening, right? And if you look at it again today, take a look at BlackRock, right? Today, $650 million in value. This is the Biddle fund. This is a money market fund they've tokenized and put on chain. This means they've sucked $650 million of crypto into their world. They've not given us shit yet. Now, they've done some BTC and ETF stuff, so I'll give them some credit for that, right? But there's that, right? You're looking at 52 holders. You look across these things, monthly active addresses. Nobody's using this shit, right? That's number one, right? You look across here, Ondo, again, good partner of ours, so is BlackRock, friends of ours, I'm not knocking them, right? But same thing, right? You look across the same thing, monthly transfer account, you're looking at the 40s, it's a little bit more, but still, it's very, very small, right? On a relative basis, people are not using these things. And it shows a very stark difference between these products and what actually is useful. So maybe let's zoom into what actually does work, right? If we look at this cycle today, I'm sure everyone here knows, there's a product called Hyperliquid, right? And Hyperliquid is very, very successful. And what does Hyperliquid do, right? This is the last 2 months, right? I know it's not apples to apples. This is the cumulative trading volume in just the 2 months, $20 billion. That's real usage. That's what people want to see, right? Even if we look at something, the next grift of the cycle, right? We look at Sonic, right? Like, even if we look at Sonic, right? $900 million in TVL. Starting in January, they were sub 30. Right? And so that means from January to now, in 2 months, they've added more TVL than the last 2 years of Ondo and BlackRock combined, right? Just to give you a sense of what's actually going on here, right? And it shows that there's a mismatch between what people are doing and what people want, right? And this is why, because all of the branding around RWAs and TradFi on chain and all this nonsense is this. Wall Street 2.0, right? I didn't like Wall Street 1.0 very much, right? So let alone to do the next version of this, right? And this is a drab kind of like, muted thing. It's not a very interesting article, right? And so this is the reason why you have a lot of TradFi folks coming into crypto to do TradFi things on chain. And what they're missing and not understanding is that the audience on chain, right, are crypto people, right? We're not trying to do the same nonsense I could do off chain, on chain. Right? And people that are actually going to come buy these assets are not going to come buy the same things you can get off-chain, on-chain, right? I can get T-bills off-chain today. I could just go to my brokerage and buy it. Why would I take smart contract risk, come in here, take extra fees, and buy Ondo stuff? Doesn't make any sense. That's why it comes to crypto, because some people cannot get out, and so that's fine. But it doesn't add anything that new to what's going on here, right? And so again, going back to this idea, on-chain TradFi limits adoption. So again, the numbers slightly out of date. Sorry, I was drinking last night, so I didn't get updated. But the RWA stuff, right? If you look at BlackRock's Biddle and OUSG, right? This is the number of TVL. This is the TVL. This is the number of holders. Again, very small, right? Contrast it to DeFi, right? And a crypto native feel for this, right? How else do you get access to the treasury on chain if you don't want to go through some ridiculous KYC, KYB, QP process, right? You can buy DAI, right? And DAI today, right, has a bunch of holders, a bunch of TVL, right? And same with Pendle. It's another way of doing yield stripping. It's another TradFi concept, right? So again, it's not apples to apples, but as I say, when you format one thing in this way, right, it doesn't match who's here, it doesn't matter what's going on. Versus when you format things for the audience that is today, you get a bunch of usage, right? And so that's kind of the distinction in where we are today and what's happening, right? And so what we want to do is get away from building for this guy and letting him dump on us and build for this guy, right? If we go back to another analogy in the real world, right? There's a guy named Roaring Kitty. I forget his real name, to be honest. But if we remember in the last cycle, we had GME, right? And GameStop and AMC and all these things, and the rise of meme stocks, right? And when we think about actual change and growing things and bringing people in, this is what brought people in last time, right? It was this idea, go into Robinhood, gamble on a bunch of shitters in the equities world before we came to do it in Doge and SHIB and these kinds of things, right? We had Wall Street bets. It was a bottoms-up field. It was a community, right? And it was coming in here to rug these guys, Melvin Capital, right? A huge $8 billion hedge fund that was trying to short this thing, and we just kept running it up and bankrupted them, right? That's what changed last time. That's what brought net new people in. That's how it actually grew the space in finance last time, right? And so it's about a new audience. It's about new things. It's about focusing on the bottoms up side, the people first, right? And so we're not trying to build this, right? We're trying to do this, right? So Plume, we are not Wall Street 2.0, right? We're Robinhood 2.0, right? The idea is very simple. We still work with all the large asset managers, right? BlackRock, UBS, Denara, you know, we've raised money from folks like Brevin, Apollo, excuse me, Wisdom Tree Galaxy, all of that. But we always focus on the people and the community first, which is a very crypto native feel and a crypto native thing, right? And that's why we have this. It's all these people, right, who've built in this community who are focused on RWAs, who are focused on crypto, who are focused on Plume, right? And you can see here, someone got a tattoo, right, which is pretty next level, right? Excuse me. And this is how we start, right? And we can see, again, like these people are nuts. They're just doing tattoos, right? And so the way this works, right, is very simple. We use that community as the buy side, and we bring assets in. Plume tokenizes those things and makes them usable for a crypto native audience. Once we're there, we begin to combine these things between crypto and the real world, and then you create net new things, right? And these net new things are how we actually get the buy side on, and how we get net new growth and new capital, new users into the ecosystem, right? And that's what we're doing here. And that's why the approach and what people talk about today, if we continue down the path that we are, we will think that things are happening, but we're getting rugged by Fink, versus if we focus on this, we'll actually grow and change things, right? And so that's what Plume is, right? We're the leading RWA chain for crypto natives, right? This is who we are, right? You know, there's 3 Asians that run the company, you know, we come from places like Coinbase, DYDX, Robinhood, right? Very trad places, and also on the a little bit of money last year around this time from, you know, great folks like Han Galaxy, of course, A Capital as well, and a bunch of folks, as well as a bunch of crypto native people, right? The founders of Injective, the founders of Say, Eigenfolk, blah, 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 right? We raised a Series A last 2 months ago now, right? And so, you know, we're really building this ecosystem, building this community, building this growth, right? And the quick overview is this, you know, when you think about RWAs, right, what we focus on is 3 things. It's ecosystem, right? We have the largest community of projects that are building on Plume. Number 2, it's community. Excuse me. Number 2 is community, right? So we have the most wallets, the most transactions, the most users, the most people on social, blah, 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 all of that, right? And we focus on liquidity and capital and the technology, right? So to breeze through it really quickly, another more tangible example, right? The only RWA that matters is the stablecoin, right? And we've seen a lot of growth in RWAs in general, right? But if you look at this, right, this is slightly out of date now. RWAs are now at 17 billion, right? Great chart, everyone likes it, we're going up, blah, 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 we feel great, right? The truth is though, right, again, these things, right, are all the things that we cannot touch. You have to be QP'd up, you've got to be KYB'd. These are the assets that we don't touch. Most of this is private credit. A lot of this is corporate bonds and government bonds and things like that, right? And when, you know, these, again, this is TradFi stuff put on chain in a TradFi context, versus when you focus on doing this in a crypto native way, we come up with a stablecoin, right? And if you just look at the stablecoin today, right? If you look at RWAs versus stablecoin, it's a very stark difference in adoption and growth, right? The stablecoin is not just taking the US dollar and slapping it on a chain, it's building the US dollar, excuse me, in a crypto native way, so I can use it just like crypto. The reason why people forget about the stablecoin as an RWA is because it's just crypto to me. I just go into a pool, I get it, I swap into, I do what I gotta do, right? It's composable across the whole ecosystem. I don't even think about it, right? Versus RWAs today are a basket of things that I don't really understand, right? It's Pokemon cards, it's cars, right? It's financial instruments. It's a bunch of shit that's never put into the same group together, right? And so that's what this is, right? And how to think about this, right? And so instead of building that, we're building this, right? For people who don't know, this is FarmVille, right? And the idea is pretty simple, right? You should be able to click buttons and interact with the real world, right? I should be able to gamble on shitters if I want and hold a bunch of Farcoin. And when I do want to, I can then rotate into and own a bunch of crops and print money that way, right? Or I can then roll it into a fleet of Starbuckses and earn yield that way, or a bunch of, or whatever it might be, right? And so it's not this, right? It's this. And that's kind of what we're focused on, right? The way to do that is by combining all these things together, right? Projects, community, liquidity into this full stack, purpose-built ecosystem, right? For crypto natives, where the use case of these assets are fit to things that we already do. One, yield farming. Two, trading. Three, speculation. That's what we already do on chain. So we find assets that fit those things versus, right, trying to, find something that we don't do today, right? And so anyway, here are a couple examples of things that you can do on Plume, right? But again, the whole point is to design this entire ecosystem from a chain's perspective, right, to make this easy. So you can tokenize anything by bringing it on chain, right, through a thing called Plume Arc. We have Plume Nexus, which is a data provider, our Oracle, and then the custom chain itself. Right. We put all these things together, so Plume is the easiest place to bring things on chain, then the best place to utilize those things on chain. Right. And the reason why we need a chain, because that's the real question. Why the hell do we need a chain? There's so many already out there, right? It's ridiculous, and I hate having to bridge around because each chain has its own feel, its own community, right? What we're talking about is bootstrapping this ecosystem, right? And bringing these net new things on chain. Right. And if you look across today, right, there's a very distinct feel between Sol and Base as an example, right? Sol today is a little bit tainted because now it's the Millet chain, right? But historically, right, it was memes. Right? And you're really looking at Pump.Fun. There's a reason why Pump.Fun works so well on Sol versus other places, right? Because the Sol community, and I'm one of those people, right, is the person that DCAs $5 into a 20K market cap shitter, right? And so there's a great alignment between the product, the ecosystem, and the liquidity there, right, to make that work, right? And if you look at Base as an example, Base has more of a feel that comes from the sort of normie social, the normie Web 2 world, because it's kind of Coinbase adjacent, right? And so that's where all the SocialFi stuff has come up, right? You had FriendTech, you have Warpcast, you have all these different things. You have Jesse running around trying to get people to buy pizzas, right? Like, it's a very different feel, right, than Solana. Right? And so these things have all backed into what the feel is, right? Even if you look at Barra, right? Barra has its own thing as well, right? And again, each one has its own feel. It's not good or bad, right? But you do need this entire thing, right? And the market has proven and shown that that's what they want, right? This is from a protocol, right, who was deploying on Base before we were around, right? They did a whole thing, had a big partnership with Jesse and blah, 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 right? And they launched crickets, no users, no buyers, nothing. Right? Versus they came to Plume, and granted it was just testnet. On there, we gave them over 300,000 transactions, over 100,000 new wallets, right? And we put them in touch with a couple LPs, closed a $10 million deal, and now they're doing stuff on Plume, right? On the other side, from the asset management, completely off-chain stuff today, right? These folks today have tried to do this. They say, look, we've talked to every tokenization provider, right? Every chain, every protocol, every ecosystem out there, right? And nobody can do this. And the reason is because there's so many things to do in tokens. I got to tokenize the asset. I got to spin up liquidity, right? I got to then put this thing into the community. Someone's got to buy it. I have to then make sure that there's an ecosystem that actually we can use it and make it composable, right? And so they've tried to do this with other places, and it hasn't worked until they came to Plume. Right? Because we've designed the whole ecosystem top to bottom to focus on this use case, right? And so that's what this is, right? You can tokenize anything, capitalize, and then distribute it through DeFi, right? This process sounds simple, not easy, right? And everyone's taking forever to do this versus what we have built is this full stack ecosystem to do this, right? So I'll breeze through this stuff because I don't want to keep saying the same words, but we've got a big ecosystem. We've been purpose-built for RWAs, really focused on this community, right? And ultimately, we're very excited for the next cycle, right? To really make sure that we can bring real things on chain. So it's not about being an RWA maxi, right? It's about being able to rotate in and out of these things in a very seamless way. So you can use crypto as you want, and when you want to use the real world, you can. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for taking the time.